The iron shackles bit into Eliza Hart's wrists as snow mixed with mud beneath the auction platform. 18 years old, virgin pure, and sold like livestock to pay debts she never made. The crowd pressed closer, hungry eyes, cruel grins, men who saw only meat. Her parents had signed the papers 3 days ago, then disappeared into the night. Now Silas Maddox's gold watch gleamed as he circled the platform, counting his profit. The auctioneer's voice boomed across Redstone's winter-dead square. "Gentlemen, what am I bid for this fine young woman?" Eliza's scream died in her throat. Nobody was coming to save her. Stay with me until the end of this story, and please comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Eliza's journey reaches. The morning Eliza Hart's life ended, the sky over Redstone, Texas wore the color of old bruises. Purple-gray clouds sagged low enough to taste, pregnant with snow that wouldn't bring joy to any child. It would bring only cold and mud and the kind of misery that turned decent folks mean. Eliza knew about misery. She'd worn it like a second skin for 18 years, stitched tight by parents who measured her worth in whiskey bottles and card games. But this morning, shackled to a post in the town square while auctioneers set up their platform, she understood that everything before had merely been practice for true despair. "Stand up straight," the auctioneer's assistant barked, yanking the chain connected to her wrist cuffs. The iron had rubbed her skin raw during the wagon ride from the jailhouse. Pink flesh showed through, threatening to weep blood if she moved wrong. Mr. Maddox wants his merchandise displayed proper. Merchandise. The word landed in her stomach like a stone. Around the square, Redstone woke to the spectacle. Shop owners cranked open shutters. Women in respectable dresses hurried past with their eyes down, pretending not to see. Men gathered in clusters, talking low, some counting coins in their pockets with expressions that made Eliza want to scrub her skin until it bled. The cattle auction happened every winter, when ranchers brought their herds to market and the town swelled with buyers from 3 territories. The square normally saw livestock sold, longhorns, horses, breeding stock. But Silas Maddox, who owned half of Redstone and controlled the other half through debt and fear, had decided to expand his merchandise this year. He'd been expanding it for years, truth be told. Just never this public, never this brazen. Eliza's father, Thomas Hart, had gambled away more than money at Maddox's saloon. He'd gambled away his daughter's freedom on a signature, a contract written in legal language that turned a human being into collateral. When the debt came due and Thomas couldn't pay, Maddox had simply collected what he was owed. The law said it was legitimate. The law said a lot of things that made good people look away. Up on the platform, the assistant shoved her toward the wooden stairs. Eliza's legs shook so hard she nearly fell. Her dress, the only decent one she owned, pale blue calico with white flowers, was already soiled from the jail cell. Her hair hung in tangled auburn waves around her shoulders. No one had allowed her a comb or privacy or even the dignity of washing her face. They wanted her to look defeated, broken, easy to control. The platform stood 4 feet high, built solid from railroad ties and oak planks. From its height, Eliza could see the entire square, the feed store, the saloon, the bank that Maddox owned, the church that pretended righteousness while charging pew rent. She could see faces she'd known her whole life, people who'd bought her mother's bread, who'd nodded hello on Sunday mornings. Not one of them met her eyes now. "Gentlemen," the auctioneer, a rail-thin man named Pickett, with a voice like a carnival barker, climbed onto the platform beside her. "Welcome to Redstone's winter market. We've got prime livestock, quality goods, and today, something special." He grabbed Eliza's arm, forcing her forward. A young woman of excellent breeding, untouched, healthy, capable of all household duties, and more. The "and more" brought laughter from the crowd, ugly laughter that slithered across Eliza's skin. "The bidding starts at $500. Pickett's voice carried across the square, echoing off storefronts. "Do I hear 500? Silence stretched for one terrible moment. Eliza dared to hope. Maybe no one would bid. Maybe this nightmare would collapse under its own weight. Maybe. 500, a voice cut through the cold air. Clint Rourke, owner of the Bar R Ranch, stepped forward with a grin that showed too many teeth. He was 40 if he was a day, with hands like slabs of meat and a reputation for working horses until they broke. His last two wives had died young. Everyone knew why. No one said it out loud. $550, another voice called. Then another bid, and another. The numbers climbed like vultures circling higher, each one stripping away another piece of Eliza's humanity. She stopped listening to the amounts, started counting her heartbeats instead, measuring her life in the throb of pulse against iron shackles. Wondered how many beats she had left before one of these men owned her, before her body stopped being hers, before... "Papa, why is that lady tied up?" The child's voice cut through Eliza's spiral. Small, confused, innocent in a way that didn't belong in this square. Eliza's gaze found the source. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, with dark braids and a coat patched at the elbows, stood beside a tall man at the edge of the crowd. The man had gone stone still, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. "Hush, Maisie," he said quietly. But his eyes, gray as winter smoke, stayed fixed on the platform, on Eliza's shackled wrists. On the way, Pickett gripped her arm like she might bolt if given half a chance. $750, Rourke's voice boomed, "and I'll add another $200 if she's guaranteed pure. Mr. Maddox has provided documentation," Pickett announced, pulling papers from his coat. "Certified by Doc Harrison. The girl's untouched, gentlemen. Virgin stock." The casual way he said it, like she was a mare being evaluated for breeding, made Eliza's knees buckle. The assistant yanked her upright. $800, a new bidder called. Then $850. The numbers kept climbing, and with each bid Eliza felt herself disappearing, becoming not a person, but a transaction, a problem being solved with money that would never touch her hands. The tall man with the gray eyes, she heard someone call him Brannon, Cole Brannon, leaned down to whisper something to his daughter. The child's face crumpled with distress. She tugged at her father's coat, pointing at Eliza, saying something urgent that Eliza couldn't hear over the auctioneer's relentless cadence. $900 going once, Pickett shouted. Going twice? Papa, please! The little girl's voice carried this time, high and desperate. You said nobody should be in chains. You said... Cole Brannon's hand moved to his daughter's head, gentle, steadying. His face had gone hard as granite. Eliza saw something shift in his expression. Not pity, which she couldn't have borne, but something deeper, colder. The look of a man making a decision that couldn't be unmade. $1,000. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The crowd went silent. Even Pickett stopped mid-gesture. Silas Maddox, watching from his position near the saloon, straightened. His gold watch chain caught the weak winter light. That's quite a bid, Brannon. Didn't know a small-time rancher had that kind of capital. I've got it. Cole's tone permitted no argument. 1,000, cash, Rourke snarled. 1,100. 1,500. Cole didn't hesitate. Didn't blink. Just stood there with his daughter clutching his coat, outbidding men who had twice his land and 3 times his cattle. The square erupted in murmurs. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Men exchanged glances that carried questions about whether Cole Brannon had lost his mind or found something worth more than cents. 1,500 going once, Pickett called, his showman's smile returning. This was better than he'd hoped. A bidding war always drove prices higher. Going twice, 2,000. Rourke's face had gone purple. Final offer. And if anyone outbids me, I'll make it my personal business to $2,500. Cole's voice cut through Rourke's threat like a blade through butter. And my offer includes a warning, Rourke. Touch my property, you answer to me. The words my property made Eliza's stomach turn, but something in the way Cole said them, flat, protective, nothing like the hunger in the other men's voices, gave her pause. Rourke opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His hand moved toward his belt, where everyone knew he carried a Colt. But Maddox stepped forward smoothly, placing himself between Rourke and Cole with a politician's practiced ease. Gentlemen, let's keep this civilized. Maddox's smile didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Brannon has made an exceptional offer. Mr. Rourke, do you wish to counter? Rourke spat into the mud. Crazy fool's welcome to her. Probably barren anyway. He stalked off, shouldering through the crowd with violence in every step. 2,500 going once, Pickett said, his voice slightly awed. That was more than most ranchers made in a year. Going twice. He paused, milking the moment. Sold! To Cole Brannon of the Broken Creek Ranch. The crowd erupted in applause and commentary. Money changed hands as side bets were settled. Eliza stood frozen on the platform, watching Cole Brannon approach with his daughter's hand firmly in his. His face revealed nothing. His eyes, though, those gray eyes held something she couldn't name. Something that wasn't cruelty. But she'd learned long ago that men's eyes lied. Cole climbed the platform steps. Up close, he was taller than she'd realized, broad-shouldered in a worn canvas coat, with calloused hands and the weathered face of someone who'd spent more time with cattle than people. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, silver with age. He pulled a leather wallet from his coat, counting out bills with methodical precision. $2,500 in cash, money that should have gone to feed his stock through winter, to repair fences, to secure his daughter's future. Instead, he laid it in Pickett's outstretched hand without a word. Maddox appeared beside them, his expensive cologne clashing with the smell of livestock and fear. You've made quite an investment, Brannon. I trust you'll find her satisfactory. The pause before satisfactory carried implications that made Eliza's skin crawl. I expect you have the key to these chains. Cole's voice held no inflection. He wasn't asking. Of course. Maddox produced a small brass key from his vest pocket, dangling it just out of reach. Though I should mention, the contract includes certain stipulations. She's indentured to you for a period of 7 years, or until the debt is considered paid through labor. She cannot leave your property without permission. She cannot seek outside employment. She cannot... I can read. Cole snatched the key from Maddox's fingers. And I've got my own stipulations. Anyone comes onto my land making claims on her, they'll answer to my Winchester before they answer to any contract. Maddox's smile tightened. I'm sure that won't be necessary. The law is quite clear. The law's clear about a lot of things. Cole turned his back on Maddox, effectively dismissing him. It was an insult in front of half the town, and Maddox's expression went glacial. But he stepped back, smoothing his coat, already calculating his next move. Cole knelt in front of Eliza, bringing himself down to eye level despite the platform's height. The gesture was unexpected, kind in a way that didn't match anything she'd prepared herself for. He lifted the shackles carefully, examining where the iron had rubbed her skin raw. This is going to hurt, he said quietly. Metal's been on too long. Skin's going to scream when air hits it. Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice. The key turned with a click that seemed to echo across the square. The shackles fell open. Cole caught them before they could hit the platform, setting them aside with deliberate care, not throwing them down in triumph, not making a show of her liberation, just removing them like the ugly things they were. Air hit her abraded wrists. Cole was right. It burned like fire, sharp enough to make her gasp. She cradled her arms against her chest, trying not to let the crowd see her shake. Cole shrugged out of his coat. It was worn leather, lined with sheep's wool, warm from his body. He draped it around Eliza's shoulders without asking permission, without touching her beyond settling the coat into place. Maisie, he said to his daughter, who'd been watching with enormous dark eyes. Come here, sweetheart. The little girl climbed the platform steps carefully, one hand gripping the railing. When she reached the top, she looked up at Eliza with the grave seriousness only children can manage. I'm Maisie Brannon, she announced. I'm 5 3/4. Papa says you're coming to live with us now. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I made this for you. Eliza took the paper with shaking hands, unfolded it. The drawing was crude in the way of all 5-year-old art, stick figures with circle heads and triangle dresses. But the meaning was clear, 3 figures holding hands, standing in front of a square that might be a house. Above them, a yellow circle sun. Below, the carefully printed words, This can be us. Something cracked in Eliza's chest. Not breaking. Maybe the opposite. Maybe the first fissure in the ice that had been forming around her heart since her father signed those papers. Thank you, she whispered. Her voice came out raw, barely recognizable. It's beautiful. Maisie beamed. Then, with the fearless affection of a child who'd been raised with kindness, she reached out and took Eliza's hand, carefully, avoiding the raw spots, but firmly enough to mean it. Come on, she said. Our wagon's over there. Papa made sandwiches for the ride home, and I get to sit in the middle so you won't be alone. Cole cleared his throat. Maisie, maybe give her a moment. It's okay. Eliza surprised herself by saying it, by meaning it. She looked at Cole, really looked at him, trying to understand what kind of man spent his livelihood on a stranger, then handed his daughter's trust to her like a gift. I'd like to go, if that's all right. Something flickered in Cole's expression. Relief, maybe, or recognition, the look of someone who'd expected a fight and found surrender instead. Come on then, he gestured toward the platform stairs. Watch your step. Ice made everything slick. The crowd parted as they descended, Maisie still holding Eliza's hand, Cole walking slightly ahead like a barrier between them and the stairs. Whispers followed in their wake, some curious, some disapproving, some downright vicious in their speculation about what Cole Brannon really planned to do with his expensive purchase. Eliza heard fragments. Never took him for that type. Poor motherless child. What's he thinking? Give it a month before she runs. Cole's wagon stood at the edge of the square, a sturdy farm vehicle with a 2-horse team. Nothing fancy, but well-maintained. He'd laid straw in the bed and covered it with blankets to create a nest of relative warmth. A basket sat in the corner, covered with a checkered cloth. Up you go? Cole lifted Maisie into the wagon first, then turned to Eliza. He didn't grab her, didn't assume, just offered his hand, palm up, waiting. Eliza took it. His grip was careful, supporting her weight as she climbed into the wagon bed. The calluses on his palm told stories of rope and reins, hard work, and harder seasons. But his touch was gentle, and he released her hand the moment she was steady. Maisie, show her the sandwiches. Make sure she eats something. Cole moved to the front of the wagon, checking the harness straps with practiced efficiency. It's a 2-hour ride to the ranch. Road's rough. Yes, Papa. Maisie pulled back the cloth, revealing thick sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. There's ham and cheese, and Papa put butter on the bread so it's not dry. And there's apples, the good kind from Mrs. Henderson's tree. Eliza stared at the food. Her last meal had been jail gruel 20 hours ago. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but her throat felt too tight to swallow. You should eat, Maisie said seriously, pushing a sandwich into Eliza's hands. Papa always says you can't face hard things on an empty belly. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. And you look like you've had pretty hard things. The simple observation, delivered with a child's blunt honesty, made Eliza's eyes burn. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of this little girl who'd shown her more kindness in 5 minutes than most adults had shown in 18 years. Thank you. Eliza unwrapped the sandwich, bit into it. The bread was fresh, the ham thick, the cheese sharp enough to wake up her taste buds. She ate mechanically, not tasting anything but not stopping either. Her body needed fuel, even if her mind was still reeling. Cole climbed onto the driver's seat, gathering the reins. The horses snorted, eager to be moving. Hold on back there. First part's cobblestone, then it's dirt road. Gets bumpy. The wagon lurched forward. Eliza grabbed the side rail, Maisie doing the same beside her. The little girl grinned like this was an adventure, not a departure from the site of a human auction. As they rolled out of Redstone Square, Eliza twisted to look back one last time. The platform still stood there, picket already calling for the next lot. Cattle this time, proper livestock. The crowd had moved on, forgetting her already. Only Silas Maddox remained focused in their direction, his face unreadable but his posture radiating calculation. Eliza turned away, pulled Cole's coat tighter around her shoulders. The leather smelled like saddle soap and wood smoke, horses and hay. Honest smells. Working smells. Papa, Maisie called toward the front of the wagon. Is Eliza going to be my new mama? Cole's shoulders stiffened. Maisie, we talked about this. Miss Hart is coming to work for us, that's all. She'll help around the house, maybe teach you some reading, but she's not... He stopped, clearly struggling with how to explain complicated adult arrangements to a 5-year-old. She's not replacing your mama. Nobody ever could. I know that, Papa. Maisie rolled her eyes with the exasperation of a child correcting a foolish adult. Mama's in heaven with the angels, but Eliza can still be part of our family, right? The picture said so. Eliza found her voice. You can call me Eliza, not Miss Hart. Just Eliza. Okay. Maisie snuggled closer, apparently considering the matter settled. Papa, can Eliza sleep in Mama's old room, the one with the window that faces the sunrise? We'll figure out arrangements when we get home. Cole's voice carried an edge of weariness. He clicked his tongue at the horses, urging them faster. 2 hours, like I said. Try to rest if you can. Rest. The suggestion seemed absurd. How was she supposed to rest when every moment of the past week replayed in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't wake from? Her father's signature on Maddox's contract. Her mother's tear-stained face as they locked Eliza in that cell. The judge who declared it all legal, proper, just payment of debts. The auction block. The chains. The eyes of men who saw meat, not a person. And then Cole Brannon, spending everything to buy her, then unlocking her chains like that was the obvious thing to do. Why? The word escaped before Eliza could stop it. She hadn't meant to ask, hadn't meant to show vulnerability by needing to know. Cole's shoulders shifted. He didn't turn around. Why what? Why did you... Eliza gestured helplessly at herself, at the wagon, at everything. You didn't have to. You could have let someone else. No. The single word cut through the wagon's rattle. Cole's voice went hard, brooking no argument. I couldn't. But $2,500 is money. He still didn't turn. I've got cattle to sell. I'll make it back. Maybe not this year, maybe not next, but I'll make it back. That's not... Eliza's throat closed. She tried again. I'm a stranger. You don't know me. I could be... You were on an auction block in chains. Now Cole did turn, twisting in the driver's seat to look at her. His gray eyes held something fierce, something that burned despite their winter color. That's all I needed to know. Everything else? We'll figure it out. Maisie patted Eliza's knee. Papa's good at figuring things out. Last winter, when the barn roof caved in, he fixed it with pieces from the old shed and 3 prayers. That's what he said. 3 prayers and some cursing. Though he didn't say cursing when he told me the story, he said creative problem solving. Despite everything, the terror, the confusion, the bone-deep exhaustion, Eliza felt her mouth twitch. Almost a smile. Not quite, but close. Maisie Faith Brannon, Cole said, but there was warmth under the sternness. What have I told you about repeating everything you hear? That I should only repeat the good parts. Maisie grinned, unrepentant. And fixing the barn was a good part, so I can tell it. Cole shook his head, but Eliza caught the ghost of a smile before he turned back to the road. Father and daughter had an easy rhythm, a shorthand built from years of being each other's primary company. It made something ache in Eliza's chest. Not jealousy exactly, but a hollow recognition of everything she'd never had. The wagon rolled on. Redstone fell behind them, replaced by open territory. The snow Eliza had smelled that morning finally began to fall, fat flakes that melted on the wagon's canvas cover. The world narrowed to the creak of wheels, the steady plod of hooves, the soft sound of Maisie humming a tune Eliza didn't recognize. Fields stretched to the horizon, brown grass bent under winter's weight. Occasional homesteads dotted the landscape, sod houses and dugouts, smoke rising from chimneys, hardscrabble country where people measured wealth in survival, not luxury. Papa, Maisie said after a long stretch of silence, can Eliza have the blue room, the one Mama always said would be perfect for guests? I told you, we'll sort it when we get home. But the blue room has the nice bed and the quilt Grandma made and... Maisie. Cole's voice held a warning note. The little girl subsided, but she caught Eliza's eye and mouthed, "Blue room," with the confidence of someone who knew she'd get her way eventually. Eliza looked down at the drawing still clutched in her hand. 3 stick figures. A yellow sun. This can be us. She'd been bought and paid for, contracted into 7 years of servitude with no say in her own future. But the man who owned her contract had unlocked her chains and given her his coat. His daughter had offered her a place in stick-figure family. And despite every instinct screaming that this had to be a trap, that kindness was always the cruelest trick because it made you hope before it destroyed you. Despite all that, Eliza felt something dangerous unfurling in her chest. Not trust. She couldn't manage trust, not yet. but maybe the possibility of it. The ghost of a thought that perhaps, just perhaps, not every man who held power used it to break things. The wagon hit a rut. Eliza grabbed the rail, her abraded wrist screaming protest. Maisie steadied her automatically, small hand on Eliza's arm, face scrunched with concern. "You okay?" Eliza started to say fine, because fine was what you said when people asked, but Maisie's dark eyes were too honest for lies. "I'm here. That's something." "It's a good something," Maisie declared with absolute certainty. Then she dug into the food basket again, emerging with a red apple. "Here. Papa says apples make everything better. I don't know if that's true for everything, but they're really good for regular things." Eliza took the apple, bit into it. The taste exploded on her tongue, sweet, tart, crisp, real. The first thing she'd tasted in days that wasn't fear. The wagon rolled on toward whatever waited at the end of this frozen road. Eliza ate her apple and held a child's drawing and wore a stranger's coat and tried not to think about the fact that Silas Maddox's cold eyes had followed them out of town, calculating. Tried not to think about what happened when men like Maddox decided their property had been stolen, contract or no contract. The snow fell harder. The horses bent into the wind, and somewhere ahead, in a place called Broken Creek Ranch, waited a blue room and a quilt, and the terrifying possibility of a future that wasn't just survival. Eliza closed her eyes, felt the wagon rock beneath her, felt Maisie's small warmth pressed against her side, felt Cole Brannon's coat heavy on her shoulders, and thought, maybe, just maybe. The word was fragile as first ice on a November pond, but it existed, and for now, after everything, existence was enough. The Broken Creek Ranch appeared through the snow like something from a half-forgotten dream, not grand, but solid. Real in a way that made Eliza's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. The main house stood 2 stories, built from timber and fieldstone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth. To the left sat a barn, weathered but sturdy, and beyond that a series of corrals where cattle clustered against the wind. Everything spoke of hard work and harder winters, of a man who built with his hands and made things last. "Home!" Maisie bounced in the wagon bed, pointing. "See the barn, Eliza? That's where Buttercup lives. She's our milk cow. And over there's the chicken coop. Papa built it extra tall so the foxes can't dig under. And that's the house where we sleep and eat, and Papa tells stories by the fire." Cole brought the wagon to a stop near the porch. The horses stamped, eager for their warm stalls. "Maisie, go inside and stoke the fire. We'll need hot water for—" He glanced at Eliza's wrists, his jaw tightening. "For washing up." "Yes, Papa." Maisie scrambled out of the wagon with the fearless agility of childhood, landing in the snow and racing toward the house without looking back. Silence settled between Cole and Eliza, the kind that felt heavy with words neither knew how to speak. Cole climbed down from the driver's seat, moving to the back of the wagon. He stood there, not reaching for her, not assuming. "I'll need to tend the horses, get them fed and brushed down. You can go inside if you want, doors unlocked, or you can wait here. Your choice." Your choice. The words landed strange after a week of having no choices at all. "I can help with the horses," Eliza heard herself say. I'm not useless. I can work." Something flickered across Cole's face. "I didn't buy you to work yourself to death, and your wrists need tending before you do anything else. I've had worse." It came out sharper than she intended, a defense mechanism, armor against kindness that might be conditional. Cole studied her for a long moment. "I believe you, but having worse doesn't mean you need to keep having it." He gestured toward the house. "Go on inside. There's a basin in the kitchen, soap by the pump. Maisie will show you where things are. I'll be in once the horses are settled." It wasn't a command, though he had every legal right to make it one. It was a suggestion, offered with the same careful distance he'd maintained since unlocking her chains. Eliza climbed out of the wagon, her legs unsteady after 2 hours of jostling road. Her feet hit snow and she wobbled. Cole's hand shot out, steadying her elbow, then released the moment she found her balance. "Careful, ice under that snow." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and made her way toward the porch. Behind her, she heard Cole leading the horses toward the barn, murmuring to them in the low, soothing tone people used with animals they respected. The house door opened before Eliza could knock. Maisie stood there, already shedding her coat, face flushed with excitement. Come in, come in. I got the fire going real good. Papa taught me how to build it right. Small sticks first, then the big logs, and you gotta leave space for the air to move or it just smokes. The interior hit Eliza with a wave of warmth that made her realize how deeply cold she'd been. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, flames crackling behind an iron grate. Simple furniture filled the space, a worn sofa, 2 chairs, a table scarred with use but clean. No luxury, but everything spoke of care, of a man who might not have much but maintained what he had. That's Papa's chair, Maisie narrated, pointing to the larger chair near the fire. And that's my chair, but you can sit there too if you want. And the kitchen's through there, that's where Mama used to cook. But now Papa does it mostly, and sometimes I help, but I'm not allowed near the stove when Papa's not watching because one time I almost caught my sleeve on fire, and Papa got really scared even though nothing bad happened. The mention of Mama, casual, matter-of-fact, the way children spoke of loss they'd learned to carry, made Eliza pause. How long has your mama been gone? 2 years and 4 months. Maisie said it like she'd counted every day. She got sick real fast. Papa says it was pneumonia, but I think it was just that sometimes people have to go be angels, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. She grabbed Eliza's hand, tugging her toward the kitchen. Come on, I'll show you where the soap is. Papa says your wrists need washing. The kitchen was larger than Eliza expected, with a cast iron stove, a deep sink with a hand pump, and shelves lined with preserved goods. Someone, Cole presumably, had put up vegetables for winter. Rows of jarred beans, tomatoes, pickled cabbage. A string of dried peppers hung near the window. A basket of potatoes sat in the corner. It was more food than Eliza had seen in her parents' house in months. Maisie pumped water into a basin, working the handle with both hands. Papa keeps the soap in that blue tin. It smells like lavender because Mrs. Henderson makes it special. She says regular soap is too harsh for ladies' skin, but Papa uses it anyway because he says his skin's too tough to know the difference. Eliza picked up the soap, inhaling the unexpected scent. Lavender, gentle. She'd expected lye soap, harsh and utilitarian. This was something else, a small luxury that someone had chosen deliberately. Papa bought that after Mama died, Maisie said, watching Eliza with those 2 observant dark eyes. He said even though Mama was gone, we should still have nice things because that's what she would want. Eliza's throat went tight. She turned to the basin, plunging her hands into the water. The cold stung her abraded wrists, but she gritted her teeth and lathered the soap, working it carefully around the raw skin. The water turned pink, then red. Does it hurt? Maisie asked quietly. Yes. Papa says it's okay to say when things hurt. He says pretending they don't just makes the hurt stay longer. Eliza glanced down at this small, serious child who spoke wisdom beyond her years. Your papa sounds like a smart man. He is. Maisie's face lit with uncomplicated love. He knows everything about cows and horses and fixing things, and he tells the best stories, scary ones and funny ones, and ones about Mama when she was young. She paused, considering. Do you want to hear a story about Mama? The question caught Eliza off guard. If you want to tell it. Maisie settled onto a kitchen stool, swinging her legs. Mama used to sing all the time. Even when she was doing boring things like churning butter or mending socks, she'd sing. Papa says that's how he knew he loved her, because her voice made even the hard days feel lighter. She smiled, distant with memory. I don't remember all her songs anymore, just pieces. But Papa remembers, and sometimes he hums them when he thinks I'm asleep. Eliza dried her hands carefully on a clean cloth hanging by the sink. Her wrists looked worse clean, angry red rings where the iron had bitten deepest, but at least they were no longer crusted with dried blood and dirt. Papa keeps medicine in the cupboard. Maisie hopped down from the stool, rummaging through a cabinet. He makes it from pine sap and other stuff. It stinks real bad, but it helps things heal. She emerged with a small jar of dark salve. I'm not supposed to use it myself, but I can get it for Papa to put on. The door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and Cole's solid presence. He'd shed his outer coat in the barn, but his hair was dusted with snow, his cheeks windburned. He stopped just inside the kitchen, taking in the scene. Eliza at the basin, her cleaned wrists visible, Maisie holding the medicine jar. "I see Maisie's been taking care of you." He moved to the sink, pumping water to wash his own hands. "Let me look at those wrists." It wasn't a question, but it wasn't quite a command either. Something in between, the tone of someone accustomed to tending wounds, animal or human, and expecting cooperation because that's just what needed doing. Eliza held out her hands, feeling exposed despite the simple medical necessity. Cole took the salve from Maisie, dipping his fingers into the dark substance. The smell hit immediately, sharp pine mixed with something else, maybe yarrow or comfrey. "This is going to sting worse than the water did," Cole warned. Then, with unexpected gentleness, he began applying the salve to her wrists. His hands were steady, careful not to press too hard on the raw flesh. "Maisie, get some clean cloth from Mama's sewing basket. We'll need to wrap these." "Yes, Papa." Maisie scurried off, her footsteps echoing up the stairs. Alone with Cole in the kitchen, Eliza felt the weight of unspoken things pressing down. The salve burned like he'd warned, but she focused on that pain instead of the larger fear coiling in her stomach. The fear of what came next, what he expected from his $2,500 investment. "I meant what I said in town." Cole's voice was low, meant only for her. His eyes stayed on her wrists, not meeting her gaze. "You're not a prisoner here. You're not—" He struggled for words. "What happened today, that auction, that was wrong. Legal, maybe, but wrong. I can't fix all of it, but I can fix your part of it." "You can't." Eliza's voice came out barely above a whisper. "The contract says 7 years. It's binding. Contracts can be broken." Cole finished with one wrist, moved to the other. "Or paid off early, or forgotten about when the person holding them decides they're more trouble than they're worth. Silas Maddox doesn't forget about his property." "Good thing you're not his property anymore, then." Cole's jaw set in a hard line. "You're mine, according to that paper. And I'm saying you're free to leave any time you want. Today, tomorrow, next week. Your choice." "I have nowhere to go." The admission tasted bitter. "No money, no family that wants me, no—" "Then stay." Cole finally looked up, his gray eyes catching hers. "Not as property. As someone who works here, lives here, gets paid fair wages and treated with respect. We need help around the ranch. Maisie needs someone besides me for company and learning. You need a place that's safe." He paused. "Seems like we could help each other, if you're willing." Eliza stared at him, searching for the trap. Men didn't spend fortunes on women and then offer them wages and freedom. It didn't make sense. There had to be an angle, a hidden expectation, something he wasn't saying. But his eyes held steady, and his hands on her wrists remained careful, and everything about him read sincere in a way that terrified her more than cruelty would have. "Why?" She asked it again, because she still didn't understand. "Why would you do this?" Cole was quiet for a long moment, his hands stilled on her wrists. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old pain. "My wife, Sarah, she came west as a mail-order bride, answered an advertisement from a rancher up in Montana. Man turned out to be a brute. Beat her, worked her like a mule, treated her worse than his livestock." He swallowed hard. "She ran. Walked 70 miles in winter until she collapsed in our barn. I found her half frozen, half starved, covered in bruises." Maisie's footsteps sounded on the stairs, but Cole kept talking, needing to finish. "I told her the same thing I'm telling you. She was safe here. Could stay or go, her choice. But while she was here, nobody would hurt her." His voice went softer. "She stayed. We got married 6 months later, and I got 5 years with the best person I've ever known before pneumonia took her." He finally released Eliza's wrist, stepping back. "So that's why. Because I know what it looks like when someone needs help and nobody's offering. And I can't save everybody, but I could save you today. So I did." Eliza's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of this man who just handed her his grief like it explained everything. Maybe it did. "I got the cloth!" Maisie burst into the kitchen, brandishing strips of clean cotton. "And I found the blue quilt from the guest room, and I put it on the bed so it'll be warm when Eliza goes to sleep tonight. Cole's mouth quirked. Determined little thing, aren't you? You said I could be determined as long as I was also respectful. Maisie handed him the cloth. Was I respectful? Mostly. Cole took the strips and began wrapping Eliza's wrists with practiced efficiency. Not too tight, but secure enough to protect the wounds. All right, Miss Eliza, these stay on for 3 days unless they get wet or dirty. Change them morning and night. Reapply the salve. It'll heal faster than you'd think. Thank you. The words felt inadequate for what he'd done, but they were all she had. Don't thank me yet. Cole moved to the stove, opening the firebox to add more wood. Ranch works hard, and winter's our meanest season. You might decide you'd rather take your chances in town. I won't. Eliza surprised herself with the certainty. I'm not afraid of hard work. Good, because chickens need feeding at dawn, and they don't care if you're tired. But there was approval in his voice, and maybe the ghost of a smile. Maisie tugged Eliza's sleeve. Come on, I'll show you your room. It's the best one, except for Papa's, and it has a window where you can see the sunrise. And there's a trunk where you can put your things, except you don't have things yet, but Papa can probably get you things from town when the snow stops. Maisie, breathe, Cole said mildly. Let the woman catch up. But Eliza let herself be pulled toward the stairs, Maisie chattering about quilts and windows and the robin's nest that appeared outside the room every spring. The stairs creaked under their feet, worn smooth by years of use. The second floor held 4 doors, 3 closed and 1 open. Maisie's room, clearly, with a small bed and toys scattered across the floor. That's Papa's room. Maisie pointed to the closed door at the end of the hall. And that's the room where we keep extra blankets and stuff. And this, she pushed open the third door with a flourish. This is yours. The blue room was simple but clean. An iron frame bed with the promised quilt, a wedding ring pattern in shades of blue and cream, a dresser with a mirror, a washstand with a pitcher and basin. And yes, a window facing east, where dawn would break when morning came. It was more than Eliza had ever had, more than she'd ever expected to have. The quilt was Grandma's, Maisie explained, running her hand over the stitching. She made it for Mama and Papa's wedding. Papa said it should be used, not just stored away, because Grandma made it for keeping people warm, and that's what it should do. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, testing the mattress. It was stuffed with straw and cotton, lumpy but adequate. The quilt was soft under her damaged hands, clearly loved and well-maintained. Do you like it? Maisie's voice held genuine anxiety, like she'd personally built the room and feared rejection. It's perfect, Eliza's voice cracked. It's the nicest room I've ever had. Maisie beamed. Then with the swift emotional shift of a child, she yawned hugely. Papa says I have to take a nap now because I got up extra early to go to town and I get cranky when I'm tired. But I'm not tired at all. I'm just... Another yawn interrupted her protest. Maisie, Cole's voice carried from downstairs. Nap time means now, not after another 10 minutes of negotiating. But I need to show Eliza where the... Now, sweetheart. Maisie sighed with the long-suffering air of someone deeply persecuted. Fine. But when I wake up, Eliza and me are going to feed the chickens together, right, Eliza? If your papa says it's all right. He will. Papa always says yes to the important stuff. Maisie gave Eliza an impulsive hug, quick and fierce, then scampered to her own room, leaving Eliza alone in the blue room with a wedding quilt and questions she didn't know how to ask. She heard Cole's boots on the stairs a moment later. He appeared in the doorway, but didn't enter, respecting the threshold. I'll be outside most of the afternoon. Got cattle to check. Fences to reinforce before the storm gets worse. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry, bread in the box, ham in the cold cellar, apples in the barrel. He shifted, uncomfortable with the domestic details. You can rest, look around, whatever you need. Just, this is your space. I won't come in without knocking. Neither will Maisie, once I remind her about manners. Cole. She used his name for the first time. He stilled. Thank you for everything. Don't. He held up a hand. Don't thank me for doing what any decent person should have done. Just try to get some rest. You look like you haven't slept in a week. I haven't. The admission slipped out. Not really. The jail cell was... She couldn't finish. Something dark crossed Cole's face. That's done now,
You're here. You're safe. And I give you my word, Eliza. Nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go."
He left before she could respond, his boots heavy on the stairs, the front door closing with a solid thunk that meant he'd gone back to the endless work of keeping a ranch alive through winter. Eliza sat in the blue room, alone for the first time since her father signed those papers. She looked at her bandaged wrists, at the quilt made by a grandmother for a bride who'd fled one kind of hell and found sanctuary here, at the window where tomorrow's sunrise would break. She thought about Cole's words, "You're safe here." She thought about Maisie's drawing, "This can be us." She thought about $2,500 spent on a stranger, chains unlocked in front of a hostile crowd, a coat given without expectation, and a man who'd loved his mail-order bride so deeply that 2 years after her death, he'd bankrupt himself to save another woman from the same fate. Eliza lay back on the bed, still wearing Cole's coat because it felt like armor against uncertainty. The quilt settled over her like a promise. Her body, pushed beyond exhaustion, began to surrender despite her mind's protests. Sleep pulled at her, and for the first time in a week she didn't fight it. Outside, the snow fell steadily, covering everything in white. In the barn, Cole checked cattle with mechanical efficiency, his mind elsewhere, on a woman with terrified eyes who'd eaten an apple in his wagon and held his daughter's drawing like it was scripture, on the look on Silas Maddox's face as they'd left town, on the contract in his saddlebag that legally bound Eliza to 7 years of servitude, and the decision he'd already made to burn the damn thing when she wasn't looking. In her small room, Maisie didn't nap. She sat at her window, drawing another picture, this one with 4 stick figures instead of 3. Papa, herself, Eliza, and a new addition. A small circle with 4 legs that might be a dog, or might be a very optimistic representation of Buttercup the cow. Under the drawing, she printed carefully, "Our family." The spelling was wrong, but the hope was bone-deep real. And in the blue room, Eliza slept. Dreamed not of chains and auction blocks, but of sunrise through an eastern window, of lavender soap and wedding quilts, of a little girl's laughter and a man's steady hands wrapping bandages, of the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, safety wasn't a lie people told to make you lower your guard. Maybe it was something you could build, one careful day at a time, with strangers who chose to become family. The thought followed her down into deep sleep, where for the first time in longer than she could remember, nightmares didn't find her. Outside, the storm intensified. Wind howled around the ranch house, testing the strength of Cole's carpentry. Snow piled against the barn doors. The cattle huddled together for warmth. And 20 miles away in Redstone, Silas Maddox sat in his office above the saloon, staring at a contract that was technically fulfilled but morally unfinished. He tapped his fingers on the desk, calculating, planning. A man didn't let $2,500 walk away without consequences. A man didn't let his reputation get damaged by some small-time rancher with hero delusions. But Maddox was patient. Winter was long. Storms made roads impassable, and isolated ranches were vulnerable when the snow drifted deep and help was hours away. He could wait. He'd waited for lesser revenge before. The gold watch in his pocket ticked steadily, counting down to a reckoning that Cole Brannon didn't yet know was coming. Eliza woke to darkness and the sound of splitting wood. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was back in the jail cell, that everything, the auction, Cole, the blue room, had been a desperate dream conjured by a mind trying to escape horror. Then her hand touched the wedding ring quilt, and reality settled back into place. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from exhaustion and the bone-deep cold that had finally released its grip. Her wrists throbbed under their bandages, but the pain was distant, manageable. Through the window, she could see nothing but darkness and swirling snow. How long had she slept? The sound came again, the solid thunk of an axe meeting wood. Eliza stood, wrapping Cole's coat around herself, and made her way downstairs. The house was warm, the fire built up high. A lantern burned on the kitchen table, casting yellow light across simple dinner preparations. Potatoes peeled and waiting, a pot of something simmering on the stove. Through the front window, she spotted Cole at the woodpile, his shirt sleeves rolled up despite the cold, splitting logs with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Each swing was precise, economical, No wasted motion. The door opened and Maisie stumbled in, bundled in a coat too large for her, dragging a basket of eggs. Her cheeks were bright red from the cold, her nose running. "Oh!" She stopped when she saw Eliza. "You're awake. Papa said to let you sleep as long as you needed, but I was hoping you'd wake up before supper because I wanted to show you the chickens and Buttercup and—" She sneezed violently, nearly dropping the egg basket. "Careful." Eliza moved forward instinctively, steadying the basket. "Are you feeling all right?" "Just cold," Maisie sniffled. "Papa says I'm not allowed to complain about being cold when there's work to be done, but I can admit it. Which is different." She carried the basket to the kitchen counter. "We got 8 eggs today. That's real good for winter. The chickens don't like laying when it's this cold, but Papa puts extra straw in their boxes and talks to them nice, and that helps." Eliza looked at the eggs, at this child who gathered them without complaint, at the pot simmering on the stove. "Is that supper?" "Stew. Papa made it this morning before we left for town. He says stew's good because you can let it cook all day and it just gets better." Maisie peeled off her oversized coat, hanging it on a peg by the door. "Do you know how to make biscuits? Papa tries, but they always come out hard. Mama used to make them fluffy, but Papa says he didn't pay attention to how she did it, and now he wishes he had." "I can make biscuits." The words came automatically. Eliza had learned young cooking was one of the few ways to make herself useful enough not to be a burden. "If you have flour and lard—" Maisie's face lit like sunrise. "We have both, and buttermilk from Buttercup. Papa will be so happy. He misses good biscuits real bad." She started pulling ingredients from the pantry with the confidence of someone who knew where everything lived. "I can help. I'm good at stirring, and I only spilled flour on the floor twice last week, and Papa said that was actually pretty good for a first try." Despite everything, the strangeness of this place, the uncertainty of her situation, the fear still coiled in her chest, Eliza felt her mouth curve. "All right then, you can be my assistant, but we do this proper, which means washing hands first." "Yes, ma'am." Maisie scurried to the sink, pumping water with enthusiasm. They fell into an easy rhythm, Maisie following instructions with grave concentration, while Eliza's hands remembered skills learned in her mother's kitchen before gambling, and drink had turned that house into something else. The familiar motion steadied her, measuring flour, cutting in lard, adding buttermilk until the dough came together in soft, shaggy mass. "Now we roll it out gentle," Eliza explained, demonstrating. "Not too much. You want it light. Heavy hands make heavy biscuits." "Mama used to say that too." Maisie pressed close, watching intently. "She said cooking was like taking care of things. You had to be firm but gentle, or else you'd break what you were trying to help." The wisdom embedded in that simple statement, firm but gentle, or else you'd break things, hit Eliza with unexpected force. She thought about Cole's careful hands on her wrists, Maisie's fierce hug, the way they'd both given her space while still making her feel welcome. Firm but gentle. Maybe that's what family was supposed to be. The door opened, bringing a gust of wind and Cole's solid presence. He'd added his coat back on, his hair dusted with fresh snow. He stopped just inside, taking in the scene. Eliza and Maisie at the counter, flour dusting their hands, the smell of biscuit dough mixing with beef stew. "Well?" His voice carried surprise and something deeper. "That's a sight I didn't expect." "Eliza's making biscuits," Maisie announced. "Real ones, like Mama used to make. She said I'm her assistant, and I'm doing real good." "I can see that." Cole hung up his coat, moving to the fire to warm his hands. "You didn't have to start working right away. I meant it when I said you could rest." "I wanted to help." Eliza cut biscuits with a water glass, laying them on a baking sheet. And Maisie did most of the work, gathering eggs, showing me where things are. "I helped lots," Maisie confirmed proudly. "And I only sneezed on the flour once, but we used that part for Buttercup anyway, so it wasn't wasted." Cole's mouth twitched. "Good thinking. Waste not, want not." He moved to the stove, lifting the lid on the stew pot and stirring. "This is ready whenever you are, Maisie. Set the table. 3 places." 3 places. Not master and servants, just 3 people sharing a meal. Eliza slid the biscuits into the oven, adjusting the damper to get the temperature right. The house settled into comfortable sounds, Maisie clattering dishes, Cole ladling stew into bowls, the fire crackling,
Wind howling outside like a living thing kept at bay by solid walls and good carpentry. "Papa," Maisie said as she placed the final fork, "can Eliza sit in Mama's chair? Is that okay?" The kitchen went still. Cole's hand paused over the stew pot. "Maisie," Eliza started, but Cole cut her off. "It's fine." His voice was level, but Eliza heard the effort behind it. "It's just a chair. No sense letting it sit empty when we have company." Company. Not property, not servant. Company. They sat, Cole at the head of the small table, Maisie to his right, Eliza to his left, in a chair that had belonged to a woman who'd found safety here and built a life. The stew was simple but good, rich with beef and vegetables, seasoned with salt and pepper and thyme. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the kind that felt companionable rather than awkward. "These biscuits." Cole broke one open, steam rising. "These are perfect." "Eliza made them," Maisie said around a mouthful. "I helped, but mostly she did it." "They're nothing special." Eliza felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Just biscuits." "They're the first good biscuits I've had in 2 years." Cole met her eyes across the table. "That's something special to me." The simple honesty in his voice made Eliza's throat tight. She looked down at her bowl, not knowing how to respond to kindness that expected nothing in return. Maisie filled the silence, chattering about the chickens, about how Buttercup had been extra grumpy during milking, about the fox tracks she'd seen near the barn. Cole listened with the patience of someone used to his daughter's constant narration, occasionally interjecting a question or correction. Watching them together, Eliza felt something shift in her chest. This was what family looked like when it wasn't poisoned by debt and disappointment. This was what home felt like when it was built on respect instead of fear. After supper, Cole washed dishes while Maisie dried and Eliza put things away, learning where everything belonged. It was domestic and ordinary, and so far from the auction block that Eliza had to keep reminding herself it was real. "All right, little bit." Cole dried his hands on a towel. "Bedtime. School tomorrow, even if the snow keeps up." "School?" Maisie's nose wrinkled. "But Papa, you said the McGraths probably wouldn't make it to town in this weather, so there won't hardly be anyone there." "Reading doesn't care if there's 1 student or 10. You need your lessons." Cole's tone permitted no argument. "Go on, get ready. I'll be up in 5 minutes to hear your prayers." Maisie sighed dramatically but headed for the stairs. Halfway up, she turned back. "Eliza, will you still be here in the morning?" The question landed in Eliza's chest like a stone. "Yes, I'll be here." "Promise?" "I promise." Satisfied, Maisie continued up the stairs, her footsteps loud on the wooden treads. Alone with Cole in the kitchen, Eliza felt the weight of unspoken things pressing down again. He moved to the fire, adding another log, buying time before turning to face her. "About what I said earlier, you being free to leave any time." His voice was low, meant only for her. "I meant it. But I also understand if you don't believe me yet." Trust isn't something you can buy with money or demand with contracts. It's something you build, day by day. "I don't understand you." Eliza's words came out sharper than intended. "Men don't act like you're acting. They don't spend fortunes and expect nothing. There has to be—" "There's no angle." Cole cut her off, but gently. "I'm not saying I'm some kind of saint. I need help around here. Real help. Maisie needs more than just me for company and learning. The house needs tending. The chickens and garden need work. I don't have time for while keeping the cattle alive." He paused. "So yes, I need you. But needing help and owning a person are different things. You'll work, I'll pay wages. You'll have a room and meals and respect. That's the deal I'm offering. Nothing more, nothing less." "What about the contract?" "What about it?" Cole's jaw set. "Far as I'm concerned, that piece of paper is Maddox's claim, not mine. I paid him off. Your debt to him is settled. What you do now is your own business." The law says a lot of things that aren't right." Cole's voice hardened. "My wife stood where you're standing once, telling me about contracts and legal obligations and everything that said she belonged to the man who beat her. I told her then what I'm telling you now. Sometimes the law is wrong, and the only thing that matters is what we choose to do when we know better."
Eliza stared at him, this man who spoke about justice and choice like they were simple things, achievable things, when her whole life had taught her otherwise. What if Maddox comes looking for his investment? Then he'll find me instead of you. Cole's expression went cold. And he'll learn real quick that some prices are too high to pay for revenge. Before Eliza could respond, Maisie's voice called from upstairs. Papa, I'm ready for prayers. Coming? Cole moved toward the stairs, then paused. Get some rest. Tomorrow's a work day, and winter doesn't wait for anyone to be ready. He started up, then stopped again. Eliza, those biscuits really were perfect. Thank you. He was gone before she could answer. Eliza stood alone in the kitchen, the fire crackling, the wind howling, her mind racing with everything he'd said. Trust built day by day, work and wages and respect. Nothing more, nothing less. She wanted desperately to believe him. She was terrified of what would happen if she did. The night passed slowly. Eliza lay in the blue room, listening to the house settle around her. Cole's footsteps as he checked the fire one final time. Maisie's soft breathing through the thin walls. The cattle lowing in the barn. Normal sounds of a working ranch putting itself to bed. She must have slept eventually because she woke to gray dawn light and the smell of coffee. When she made her way downstairs, she found Cole already dressed, feeding the fire. Morning. He poured coffee into a tin cup, offering it to her. Storms passed, but left 3 feet of new snow. Roads won't be passable for days. He said it matter of fact, but Eliza caught the implication. They were isolated, cut off, alone out here. Alone with a man she barely knew. If Cole noticed her tension, he didn't show it. He just finished his coffee and reached for his coat. Cattle need checking. I'll be back in an hour for breakfast. Maisie's still sleeping. Let her rest another 30 minutes, then wake her for schoolwork. Schoolwork? Can't get to town, so we do lessons here. She's learning reading and sums. Had a teacher in town up until last month, but she married a merchant and moved to Denver. He pulled on his boots. If you know letters and numbers, maybe you could help. Maisie responds better to women teachers. Before Eliza could answer, he was gone, the door closing firmly behind him. She stood alone in the kitchen, Cole's coffee warming her hands, dawn breaking over snow-covered territory. Through the window, she watched him trudge toward the barn, a dark figure against white landscape, moving with purpose even through drifts that reached his knees. Maisie appeared on the stairs 30 minutes later, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Is Papa outside? Checking cattle. He always does that first thing, even when it's awful cold. Maisie came to stand beside Eliza at the window. He says the cattle depend on him, and dependable means you show up even when you don't want to. Dependable. Show up even when you don't want to. Words to live by, maybe. They made breakfast together. Eggs from yesterday's gathering, leftover biscuits warmed by the fire, butter and jam from the pantry. When Cole returned, stamping snow from his boots, his face was grim. Fences down on the north pasture. Probably the weight of the snow. Need to get it fixed before the cattle wander. He ate standing up, already planning his day. Maisie, double lessons today since you'll miss town school tomorrow too. Eliza can supervise while I'm out. Can Eliza teach me instead? Maisie asked, hopefully. No offense, Papa, but you get impatient with sums. None taken. Cole rinsed his plate. Eliza, you comfortable with that? Was she? Teaching was worlds away from what she'd expected when she woke up on an auction block. But Maisie's hopeful face, Cole's matter-of-fact assumption that she was capable, it made something stir in Eliza's chest. Purpose, maybe. Or the memory of dreams she'd had before debt and desperation had stolen them. I can try. Good enough. Cole grabbed his tools, heading back into the cold. I'll be gone most of the day. There's more stew for lunch, bread if you get hungry. Anything happens, ring the bell on the porch. I'll hear it and come running. Then he was gone again, leaving Eliza alone with a 5-year-old and the unexpected responsibility of education. Maisie proved an eager, if easily distracted student. They worked through letters and simple words, Maisie sounding out each one with fierce concentration. When attention flagged, Eliza switched to sums, using dried beans from the pantry to make numbers concrete. If you have 7 chickens, Eliza said, and 3 stop laying because it's too cold, how many eggs might you still get? 4. Maisie counted beans carefully.
But Papa says chickens are unpredictable, so maybe 3. Or 5 if they're feeling generous. Your Papa's right about that. Eliza smiled despite herself. Let's try another one. If you need 12 biscuits for supper. A crash from outside cut her off. Both of them froze, listening. Then Cole's voice, raised in anger, and another voice responding, deeper, aggressive, unfamiliar. Eliza's blood went cold. Stay here, she told Maisie, but the child was already moving toward the window. That's Mr. Rourke! Maisie's voice went high with fear. The mean man from the auction! What's he doing here? Eliza's heart hammered. She moved to the window, peering out carefully. 3 men on horseback sat in the yard despite the snow that made travel nearly impossible. Clint Rourke was in the center, flanked by 2 rough-looking ranch hands. Cole stood in front of them, his hand resting casually on his hip, near his gun, Eliza realized. I'm here for what's mine by rights, Rourke's voice carried through the walls. You cheated that auction, Brannon. Everyone knows it. I paid fair price. Cole's voice was level but hard. Higher than you were willing to go. That makes her mine legally. To hell with legal. You got no right. I got every right. I got a bill of sale and a contract signed by Maddox himself. You got nothing but sour grapes. Eliza watched, frozen, as Rourke's face went purple with rage. His hand moved toward his gun belt. Don't. Cole's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. You draw on my property, you better be prepared to finish it, and I promise you won't like how it ends. The standoff stretched, seconds feeling like hours. Eliza's mind raced. She should go out there, defuse this, offer to leave with Rourke to prevent bloodshed. Cole had done enough, risked enough. She wasn't worth men dying over. She was moving toward the door before conscious thought caught up. Eliza, no! Maisie grabbed her hand. Papa said to ring the bell if something happened. He'll be mad if you go out there. I can't let him. He's protecting us. Tears streamed down Maisie's face. That's what Papas do. Please don't go. Please. You promised you'd stay. The raw fear in Maisie's voice stopped Eliza cold. She looked at this child who'd lost her mother, who was watching strange men threaten her father, who was begging Eliza not to abandon her. Eliza pulled Maisie close, her own heart racing. All right, I'm staying. But if anything happens... Outside, Rourke spat into the snow. This ain't over, Brannon. Maddox wants his property back. And what Maddox wants, he gets. You'll see. Tell Maddox if he's got problems with how I conduct my business, he can take it up with me. Direct. Not send his dogs to do his barking. The insult hung in the air. For a moment, Eliza thought Rourke would draw anyway, would force this to violence. But something in Cole's stance, utterly still, utterly ready, made even Rourke think twice. You made an enemy today, Rourke growled. Remember that when winter gets long and help's far away. He wheeled his horse, his men following, and they rode off through the snow at a pace that was reckless in the drifts. Cole stood watching until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did his shoulders relax fractionally. He turned toward the house and saw them in the window, Eliza and Maisie pressed together, watching. His expression softened immediately. He strode to the porch, stamping snow from his boots before entering. Everyone all right? His eyes went to Maisie first, then Eliza. No one's hurt? We're fine. Eliza's voice shook despite her efforts. But they threatened? Empty threats from empty men. Cole moved to the fire, adding wood with deliberate calm, but Eliza saw the tension in his shoulders. Rourke's a bully. Bullies make noise, but rarely follow through when someone stands up to them. Papa, Maisie's voice was small. Is Mr. Maddox really mad about Eliza? Cole knelt in front of his daughter, taking her hands in his. Mr. Maddox is a man who doesn't like losing. But you know what? Sometimes losing is exactly what people need to learn. And we're not giving back what's ours just because he's unhappy. Eliza's ours? Maisie's question was innocent, but it made Eliza's chest constrict. Eliza's her own person, Cole corrected gently. But she's part of this household now, which means we look after her. Same as she looks after us. He glanced up at Eliza. Right? The question held weight beyond its simple words. He was asking if she was in, if she was committed to this strange arrangement, if she'd trust him to handle threats without running. Eliza thought about $2,500 and unlocked chains, about biscuits and lesson plans and a child's fierce hug.
about a man who stood between danger and his household without hesitation. "Right," she heard herself say. "Same as I look after you." Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Cole stood, ruffling Maisie's hair. "All right then. How about we finish those lessons, then make something special for supper? I think we could all use something warm and filling after this morning's excitement." "Can we make Mama's apple cake?" Maisie asked. "Eliza probably knows how—" "I do," Eliza said softly. "If you have the ingredients." "We have everything." Cole moved toward the door, reaching for his coat again. "I need to finish that fence before dark, but I'll be back before supper. And Eliza?" He paused. "Thank you for staying inside, for keeping Maisie safe. I know you wanted to come out there. How did you—" "Saw it in how you moved toward the door." His mouth quirked slightly. "You got a protective instinct. That's good. But sometimes the best way to protect people is to let them protect you back." He left before she could formulate a response to that piece of wisdom. The rest of the day passed in domestic routine that felt surreal after the morning's threat. Eliza and Maisie finished lessons, then started preparations for the apple cake, peeling fruit, mixing batter, the kitchen filling with cinnamon sweetness that drove out the lingering fear. But Eliza's mind kept returning to Rourke's words. Maddox wants his property back. She wasn't naive enough to think one confrontation would end it. Men like Maddox and Rourke didn't accept defeat gracefully. They circled back, looking for weakness, waiting for opportunity. And winter was long. Help was far away. The ranch suddenly felt very isolated. That night, as they sat down to supper, beef stew with fresh biscuits and warm apple cake, Cole cleared his throat. "Need to be honest with you both about something." His voice was serious. "Today's visit from Rourke, that's not going to be the end of it. Maddox is going to push one way or another. He's got pride and money, and that's a dangerous combination." "What are we going to do?" Maisie asked, her hand finding Eliza's under the table. "We're going to do what we always do. Take care of our own, protect what's ours, and not back down from what's right just because it's hard." Cole met Eliza's eyes. "But I need to know you're ready for that, because it might get harder before it gets easier." Eliza thought about the auction block, about her father's betrayal and her mother's tears, about 18 years of learning that nobody came to save you, that survival meant being small and quiet and grateful for scraps. Then she thought about Maisie's drawing and a wedding ring quilt and biscuits that made a man smile after 2 years of grief. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it. Cole nodded once, satisfied. "Then we'll face whatever comes. Together." Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying with it the promise of more snow, more isolation, more long winter nights where anything could happen and no one would hear you scream. But inside, the fire burned bright, and 3 people sat at a table that had known loss but was learning hope again. And maybe that was enough to hold darkness at bay, at least for tonight. The threat came 3 nights later, when the moon was dark and the snow had crusted over hard enough to muffle footsteps. Eliza woke to the smell of smoke. Not the clean wood smoke of a banked fire, but something sharper, meaner, the acrid stench of burning hay and kerosene. She was out of bed before conscious thought caught up, her heart slamming against her ribs as she ran to the window. The barn was on fire. Orange flames licked up the eastern wall, fed by wind that turned them into hungry mouths devouring dry timber. The cattle inside were bellowing, panicked, and somewhere in that chaos she heard Cole's voice shouting commands. Eliza ran for the stairs, nearly colliding with Maisie in the hallway. The child's face was white with terror, her nightgown twisted around her legs. "Papa's out there?" Maisie's voice cracked. "The barn's burning and Papa's—" "Stay here." Eliza grabbed Maisie's shoulders, making the child look at her. "Stay in the house. Lock the door behind me. If anyone comes who isn't me or your papa, you hide. You understand?" "But, Maisie, promise me." The little girl's chin trembled, but she nodded. "I promise." Eliza flew down the stairs, grabbing Cole's spare coat from the peg and shoving her feet into boots that were too large. The night air hit her like a fist when she burst through the door, cold enough to freeze breath in her lungs, hot enough where the flames reached to sear exposed skin. Cole was at the barn doors, wrestling them open against warped hinges. Smoke poured out in black billows. Inside, the cattle screamed. "Get back," he shouted when he saw her. "The whole thing could collapse." Then you need help. Eliza grabbed a bucket from the porch, running toward the water trough. It was partially frozen, but she smashed through the ice, filling the bucket and running it toward the flames. It was futile, one bucket against an inferno, but doing nothing felt like dying. Cole managed to get the doors open. Cattle poured out, wild with fear, stampeding into the snow. He counted them as they passed, his face grim in the firelight. When the last one emerged, he grabbed Eliza's arm. That's all of them. Now we save what we can and let the rest burn. They worked in desperate tandem, Cole directing her to grab tools from the burning structure while he hauled out saddles and tack. The heat was tremendous, the smoke choking. Eliza's eyes streamed, her lungs burned, but she kept moving, hauling bridles, dragging feed sacks, anything that could be salvaged. Then Cole was shoving her away from the barn, his face black with soot. It's going. Get clear. They stumbled backward just as the roof beam cracked. The barn's eastern wall collapsed inward with a roar, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. The structure that Cole had repaired 3 winters running, where he'd taught Maisie to milk a cow and stored hay for lean times, it folded like paper, reduced to kindling and memory. They stood in the snow, breathing hard, watching it burn. The cattle had scattered into the darkness, frightened but alive. The tools and tack lay in a jumbled pile, saved but homeless. And nailed to the fence post nearest the house, barely visible in the firelight, was a piece of paper. Cole walked to it slowly, his movements stiff with exhaustion and fury. He ripped it down, holding it close to read by the flames devouring his livelihood. Eliza didn't need to see it to know what it said. The threat made real. Get inside! Cole's voice was flat, empty in a way that was more frightening than rage. Check on Maisie. I need to round up the cattle before they freeze or bolt completely. Cole, inside, Eliza. Please. The please was what did it. The crack in his armor, the momentary vulnerability of a man who'd just lost half his operation and was trying not to break in front of witnesses. Eliza went. She found Maisie at the window, tears streaming down her face, watching her whole world burn. Eliza pulled the child close, feeling small hands clutch at her nightgown with desperate strength. Is Papa okay? Maisie's voice was muffled against Eliza's shoulder. Is he hurt? He's fine. He's getting the cattle. Eliza stroked Maisie's hair, her own hand shaking with delayed shock. He's fine, sweetheart. We're all fine. But they weren't fine. Fine was a lie they told children to keep nightmares at bay. They watched through the window as Cole moved through the darkness, calling cattle with patience that must have cost him everything. One by one, they returned to his voice, confused, frightened, but trained to trust him even when their shelter had become an inferno. He herded them toward the small equipment shed, the only remaining structure with 4 walls and a roof. It wasn't enough space, wasn't proper shelter, but it was something. He disappeared inside with them, and Eliza imagined him checking hooves, soothing spooked animals, doing what needed doing because that's who he was, dependable, even when it cost him everything. The barn burned until dawn, by which time it was nothing but charred timbers and ash. Cole came inside as gray light broke over the devastation, his face haggard, his clothes reeking of smoke and sweat and loss. Maisie ran to him immediately, burying her face in his ruined shirt. He held her tight, his eyes closed, jaw clenched against whatever he was feeling. I'm sorry, baby girl, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, Papa. Maisie's voice was fierce. It's Mr. Maddox's fault. He's the mean one. He's the one who should be sorry. Cole's eyes opened, finding Eliza's over his daughter's head. In them she saw exhaustion, rage, and something else, determination hardened into steel. We need to talk. He released Maisie gently. Sweetheart, go get dressed. We're going to town today. But the snow? The main road should be passable now, and we've got business that can't wait. His tone permitted no argument. Go on. Warm clothes and don't forget your hat. Once Maisie was upstairs, Cole sank into his chair by the fire. He pulled the note from his pocket, unfolding it with deliberate care. Eliza came to stand beside him, reading over his shoulder. The words were simple, brutal. Return my property or lose more than buildings. You have 3 days. No signature. None needed. He's going to keep coming, Eliza said quietly, until he gets what he wants or destroys everything you have. Then he's going to be disappointed. Cole's voice was cold. Because I'm not giving him anything. Cole, this is insane. I'm not worth— Don't. He stood abruptly, facing her. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Don't you dare tell me you're not worth defending, because that's exactly what Maddox wants you to believe. That you're not worth the trouble. That you should just surrender to make things easier for everyone else. But your barn can be rebuilt. My cattle are alive. My daughter's safe. You're safe. That's what matters. He moved closer, his gray eyes burning with intensity. I told you I'd protect what's mine. I meant it. And before you start arguing about being property, understand this. You're mine the way Maisie's mine, the way this ranch is mine. Not because I own you, but because I've claimed responsibility for you. Because you're part of this household, and I don't abandon my own. Eliza's throat closed. She wanted to argue, to protest that he was being foolish, risking everything for someone he barely knew. But the truth was written all over his soot-stained face. He would do this regardless of what she said. His code wouldn't permit anything else. So what do we do? Her voice came out barely above a whisper. We go to town. We talk to the sheriff, file a complaint, make this public. Maddox operates on fear and silence. We take that away from him. Cole grabbed his coat, checking the pocket where he kept his pistol. And if the law won't help, we find people who will. I'm not fighting this alone anymore. The ride to town took 3 hours through snow that fought them every mile. Cole drove the wagon with grim determination, Maisie wedged between him and Eliza, silent for once. The child sensed the gravity of what was happening, the way children do when adult certainty cracks and lets fear show through. Redstone looked different in daylight, without an auction block dominating the square. Just a frontier town going about its business, people moving between shops, horses tied at rails. Life continuing as if 3 nights ago a man's livelihood hadn't been burned in retaliation for basic decency. Cole pulled the wagon up in front of the sheriff's office, a small building with barred windows and a faded sign. He helped Maisie down, then Eliza, his hand lingering on her arm. Stay close, he said quietly, and let me do the talking. The sheriff was a man named Garrett, 50 if he was a day, with a face weathered by frontier life and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by human cruelty. He listened to Cole's account without interruption, his expression neutral. And you're certain it was Maddox's doing? Garrett asked when Cole finished. Who else would it be? He's been making threats since the auction. Threats aren't evidence. Garrett leaned back in his chair. Did you see anyone set the fire? Got witnesses? It was the middle of the night. Then you got no proof, just suspicion. The sheriff's tone wasn't unkind, just resigned. Cole, I understand your frustration, but Silas Maddox is a powerful man in this town. He owns the bank, half the businesses, holds mortgages on most of the ranches. Without solid evidence, I can't just go accusing him of arson. So he gets to destroy property and threaten lives, and you do nothing? Cole's voice was dangerously quiet. I'm saying I need proof. Bring me a witness, bring me evidence, and I'll act. But I won't start a war with Maddox based on a burned barn and a feeling. Cole stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. Then the law's as useless as I thought. Cole, Garrett stood too, his voice hardening. Don't do anything stupid. If you take this into your own hands, I'll have to come after you regardless of who was right. You understand? Perfectly. Cole grabbed Maisie's hand, gesturing for Eliza to follow. Come on, we're wasting time here. They emerged into the street, Cole's jaw set so tight Eliza worried his teeth would crack. Maisie looked between them, confused and frightened. Papa, what are we going to do? We're going to talk to people who aren't bought and paid for by Silas Maddox. Cole scanned the street, his eyes settling on the church at the far end. Come on. The church was small, whitewashed, with a cross above the door that had weathered to silver. Inside, the air smelled of candle wax and old wood. A man was arranging hymnals in the pews, young for a preacher, maybe 30, with earnest eyes and ink-stained fingers. Reverend Walsh, Cole's voice echoed in the empty space. Got a minute? Walsh turned, his face lighting with recognition. Cole, I heard about the barn. I'm so sorry. He stopped, his eyes landing on Eliza. Recognition flickered, followed by something that might have been guilt. Miss Hart. You remember her. Cole's tone wasn't a question. I was at the auction. Walsh's voice dropped. I wanted to protest, to say something, but he stopped, shame coloring his features. I'm not proud of my silence. Then help me break the silence now. Cole moved closer. Maddox burned my barn because I won't return Eliza to him. The sheriff won't act without evidence. I need people willing to stand up, to say publicly that what's happening is wrong. Walsh's expression became pained. Cole, I sympathize, truly. But Maddox's influence extends even here. The church building, he holds the deed. He could evict us, shut us down if I speak against him openly. So you'll do nothing? Again? Cole's voice was sharp with disappointment. I didn't say that. Walsh looked at Eliza, and in his eyes she saw genuine remorse. Miss Hart, I owe you an apology for my cowardice, and perhaps I can make partial amends. He moved to his small office, returning with paper and pen. I can write to the territorial governor, document what happened, create a record. It won't be immediate help, but it's something. It's not enough. Cole's hands clenched into fists. Perhaps not. But it's what I can offer without destroying this congregation's home. Walsh's voice was steady, despite the shame in his eyes. Sometimes courage looks like small acts, Cole. Not everyone can be the hero charging into fire. The words hung in the air. Cole's jaw worked, but finally he nodded once, sharp and frustrated. Write your letter then, and pray it matters. They left the church with nothing but a promise of bureaucratic documentation, which felt hollow against the memory of flames consuming timber and livelihood. Papa, I'm hungry, Maisie said in a small voice. Cole closed his eyes briefly, his hand finding his daughter's head. Right. Of course. Let's get some food. They went to the general store, which had a small restaurant in the back serving hot meals. The owner, a woman named Martha, greeted them with warm familiarity that faltered when she saw Eliza. Cole? Maisie. Martha's eyes darted to Eliza, then away. Heard about your barn. Terrible thing. It was. Cole guided them to a table. 3 bowls of whatever's hot. And coffee. The restaurant was half full, and as they sat, Eliza felt the stares. Whispers started immediately, not even bothering with subtlety. She caught fragments. That's her. The one from the auction. Caused all this trouble. Should have just let Rourke take her. Cole's expression went glacial. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loud enough to cut through the whispers. Something to say? His voice carried to every corner of the restaurant. Anyone here got opinions about my business? Now's the time to speak up. Silence fell. Men looked at their plates. Women suddenly found their coffee fascinating. That's what I thought. Cole sat back down, his message delivered. But Eliza saw the cost in the tightness around his eyes. This was his community, people he'd lived alongside for years, and they were choosing comfortable silence over difficult support. Martha brought their food without meeting anyone's eyes. The stew was good, but it tasted like ash in Eliza's mouth. Maisie ate mechanically, her usual chatter absent. They were finishing when the door opened and Silas Maddox walked in. He looked exactly as Eliza remembered. Expensive suit, gold watch chain, the kind of confidence that came from owning everything and everyone around him. His eyes found their table immediately, and his smile was all teeth. Cole Brannon. Maddox approached their table with the casual entitlement of someone who knew the room was his. Heard you had some trouble out at your place. Terrible thing. Barn fires. So dangerous, especially in winter. Cole's hand moved slowly to rest on the table, inches from where Eliza knew his pistol sat under his coat. Funny you should mention it. Just expressing neighborly concern. Maddox's eyes slid to Eliza, and his smile sharpened. Miss Hart, you're looking well. Better than the last time I saw you. Certainly. He turned back to Cole. You know, I've been thinking about our transaction. I believe there may have been some irregularities. The contract was for labor exchange, not outright sale, which means technically I still maintain certain rights. You maintain nothing. Cole's voice was ice. I paid your price. The contract is satisfied. See, that's where you're wrong. Maddox pulled papers from his coat pocket, unfolding them with deliberate care. The fine print, which I'm sure you didn't read in your haste to play hero, specifies that the debtor remains under contract for 7 years of labor. You purchased the right to her labor, not her freedom. She's still legally bound. Eliza's blood went cold. She'd feared this, but hearing it said aloud made it real. That's a lie, Cole said flatly. It's the law. Maddox's smile never wavered. And I'm prepared to be generous. Return Miss Hart to complete her contract term under my supervision, and I'll consider the matter of your barn an unfortunate accident. No further incidents need occur. And if I refuse? Maddox's expression went cold. Then accidents tend to multiply. Fences fail, livestock wanders, houses catch fire, with people inside them. His eyes flicked to Maisie. Children are so vulnerable, aren't they? Especially when their fathers are too stubborn to see reason. Cole was out of his chair before Maddox finished speaking, his hand on the man's collar, shoving him against the wall with enough force to rattle dishes. The restaurant erupted in gasps and shouted warnings, but Cole's focus never wavered. You threaten my daughter again, Cole's voice was deadly quiet. And I'll kill you where you stand. Law be damned. Cole, don't! Martha's voice cut through the tension. He's baiting you. The sheriff's right outside. Indeed, Sheriff Garrett was pushing through the door, hand on his pistol. Cole Brannon, step away, now. Cole held Maddox for one more heartbeat, making sure his message was received, then released him with a shove. Maddox straightened his suit, his smile returning despite the fear that had flashed briefly in his eyes. You see, Sheriff? Assault in front of witnesses. I want him arrested. Garrett looked between them, his expression weary. Cole, I warned you about taking things into your own hands. He threatened my child. I merely expressed concern for the safety of all children in these troubled times. Maddox's voice was smooth, innocent. If Cole interpreted that as a threat, perhaps his conscience is troubling him about the theft of my property. I stole nothing. Gentlemen, enough. Garrett's voice held authority worn thin by frontier compromise. Cole, take your family and go home. Maddox, if you've got legal complaints, file them properly. But I'm done with this public theater. Gladly. Maddox adjusted his watch chain. Cole, you have until tomorrow night. Return Miss Hart, or face the consequences of your stubbornness. He nodded to the sheriff. Good day, gentlemen. He swept out, leaving silence in his wake. Garrett turned to Cole, his voice low and urgent. Get out of town, now, before I have to arrest you for something I don't want to arrest you for. Cole grabbed Maisie's hand, gesturing curtly to Eliza. They left the restaurant under the weight of a dozen stares, none sympathetic. In the street, Cole's face was a mask of barely controlled rage. Papa? Maisie's voice trembled. What's going to happen? Nothing. Cole lifted her into the wagon. Nothing bad is going to happen, I promise. But as they drove out of Redstone, Eliza saw him scanning the buildings, his hand never far from his gun. He was making calculations, preparing for a fight he couldn't win alone. The ride home was silent except for the creak of wagon wheels and the wind that carried the smell of approaching weather. More snow coming, Eliza thought. More isolation, more vulnerability. When the ranch came into view, what was left of it, the blackened scar where the barn had stood, Cole pulled the wagon to a stop before they reached the house. Eliza. His voice was rough. I need you to understand something. I won't force you to stay. If you want to go back to Maddox, end this before anyone else gets hurt, I won't stop you. It's your choice. Eliza looked at the burned barn, at Maisie's frightened face, at this man who'd spent everything to save her and was now offering her freedom again, even as it cost him his home. I'm not going back. Her voice was steady. Whatever comes, I'm not going back to him. Something fierce and proud flashed in Cole's eyes. Then we fight, together. Together? Eliza echoed, and felt the weight of that promise settle on her shoulders like armor. They drove the last 100 yards to the house, and Eliza saw what she hadn't noticed in the chaos of the fire. Scratches on the doorframe. Someone had tried to get inside while they were distracted by the flames. They'd come for her once already. They would come again. And next time, Maddox wouldn't stop at burning buildings. Cole stood on the porch, his Winchester cradled in his arms, staring at the scratches on the doorframe like they were a language he was learning to read. Behind him, Eliza could hear Maisie crying softly in the house, exhausted by fear and confusion and the weight of adult problems pressing down on a child's shoulders. They tried to get in while we were fighting the fire. Cole's voice was flat, stating fact. Probably would have, if Maisie hadn't locked the door like you told her. Cole, I can't protect you both. The admission came out raw, scraped from somewhere deep. Not against Maddox, money, and men. Not out here, isolated, with winter making help impossible. He turned to face her, and Eliza saw something she'd never expected to see in those steady gray eyes. Helplessness. I don't know what to do. The confession hit her harder than any threat. This man who'd stood between her and auction block cruelty, who'd faced down armed men without flinching, who'd promised protection with absolute certainty, he was admitting defeat, and it was her fault. Then I'll go. Eliza's voice came out stronger than she felt. I'll go back to Maddox. Tell him I'm fulfilling the contract willingly. He'll have no reason to hurt you or Maisie if I... No. Maisie's voice cut through from the doorway. The little girl stood there, her face blotchy with tears, but her chin set with determination that was pure Cole Brannon's stubbornness. You can't go. You're part of our family now. Sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups have to... No! Maisie ran to Eliza, wrapping her arms around her waist with desperate strength. You promised. You promised you'd stay. And Papa said we don't break promises in this family. Eliza looked helplessly at Cole, but he was staring at his daughter with an expression that broke and rebuilt something in his chest all at once. She's right. Cole's voice was quiet but absolute. We don't break promises, and I promise to protect you both. He straightened, some decision solidifying behind his eyes. So we find another way. What other way? Eliza heard the desperation in her own voice. The sheriff won't help. The town won't help. Maddox has everything. Money, men, legal authority. He doesn't have everything. A new voice spoke from beyond the porch, and they all turned to see a woman on horseback approaching through the snow. She was older, maybe 60, with steel gray hair and a face weathered by frontier life. Behind her rode 3 more figures, 2 men and another woman, all carrying rifles. Cole's hand moved to his Winchester, but the lead rider raised her palm in peace. Easy, Cole. We're not the enemy. She dismounted with practiced ease. I'm Helen Tucker. I own the Triple T spread about 10 miles east, and these are some of your neighbors. She gestured to the others. Tom and Sarah McGrath. And that's Peter Chen. We heard about your barn. News travels fast. Cole's voice was cautious, not quite trusting. News of a man standing up to Silas Maddox travels faster. Helen climbed the porch steps, her eyes taking in the burned barn, the scratched door frame, the exhaustion written on all their faces. Maddox has been squeezing this territory for years, buying up debt, foreclosing on good people, using legal tricks, and hired muscle to expand his empire. Most of us bent the knee because fighting seemed impossible. Then why are you here now? Eliza asked. Because you didn't bend. Helen's gaze was direct, assessing. You're the girl from the auction, the one Cole bought and set free. He didn't set me free. He unlocked your chains in front of the whole town. Helen's voice held something like approval. That's freedom enough to matter, and when Maddox came for revenge, Cole didn't back down. She turned to Cole. That kind of courage is contagious. Makes other people remember they've got spines, too. Tom McGrath stepped forward, a weathered rancher with kind eyes. Maddox holds my mortgage. Been threatening to call it due if I don't vote his way in the territorial council. But watching you stand up to him, that gave me an idea. What if we all stopped being afraid at the same time? You can't fight him with force, Cole said. He'll just bring in more men. We don't fight with force. Sarah McGrath's voice was sharp with intelligence. We fight with what hurts him most, his reputation and his money. Helen pulled papers from her saddlebag. I've been writing to newspapers in Denver, Santa Fe, even back east, documenting what Maddox has done, the questionable contracts, the intimidation, the human auction he conducted right in Redstone Square. Turns out, civilized folks in settled territories get real upset when they hear about slavery happening in the name of debt collection. It was legal, Eliza started. Legal and moral aren't always the same thing.
Peter Chen's voice carried the accent of someone who'd learned English as a second language. I came to this country to escape one kind of bondage. I will not watch it happen here. He looked at Eliza. Miss Hart, would you be willing to tell your story? All of it. What was done to you, what Cole did, what Maddox is doing now. I don't understand how that helps. Public opinion. Helen's eyes gleamed with strategic thinking. Maddox operates in shadows, using legal technicalities and fear. We drag him into daylight, make his actions public record. The territorial governor is up for re-election next year.
He won't want the scandal of condoning quasi-slavery in his jurisdiction. Cole was shaking his head. That takes time, weeks, maybe months for newspapers to print stories, for political pressure to build. Maddox's deadline is tomorrow night. So we buy time. Tom's voice was steady. Starting tonight, we take turns keeping watch on this ranch. Never less than 4 adults armed and ready. Maddox wants to burn or intimidate, he'll have to go through all of us. You'd risk that? Eliza's voice cracked. Risk your homes, your families, for a stranger? Not for a stranger. Sarah McGrath's voice was firm. For the principle that people can't be bought and sold. For the idea that communities protect their own instead of letting bullies run roughshod. She paused. And because most of us know someone who's been hurt by Maddox's system. My sister was sold to pay her husband's gambling debts. She died 3 years ago, worked to death by the man who bought her contract. I didn't help her. I live with that shame every day. But I can help you. Silence fell over the porch. Eliza felt tears burning in her eyes. Not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming realization that sometimes, rarely, people chose courage over comfort. I have an idea. Maisie's small voice broke the quiet. Everyone turned to look at her. Papa always says the best way to fight mean people is to not let them make you mean too. So what if we invited the whole town here? Like a barn raising, except we already need a barn raised. And everyone could see that Eliza's not property, she's just a person who makes really good biscuits and teaches me reading better than Papa does. Maisie, that's... Cole started, but Helen was already nodding. The girl's right, not about the specifics, but the principle. We make this public, make it impossible for Maddox to act without everyone seeing. She turned to Cole. How fast can you spread word about a community gathering? Tomorrow. Daylight? Everyone invited? The McGraths know half the territory, Tom said. Sarah can ride circuit, invite folks personal. If we frame it right, as a barn raising for a neighbor in need, people will come. Frontier folk don't turn down a chance to help with honest work. And while they're here, Peter Chen added, they see Miss Hart working alongside everyone else. See, she's no threat, just a woman trying to survive. Hard to maintain fear of someone you've worked beside. Cole looked at Eliza, the question clear in his eyes. This would put her on display again, make her the center of attention and speculation. It would be uncomfortable, maybe humiliating, but it might also save them all. I'll do it, Eliza said. Whatever needs doing, I'll do it. The next day dawned clear and cold, the kind of winter morning where breath froze in the air and everything felt crystalline with possibility. By mid-morning, wagons started arriving. First the McGraths with their 3 sons, then Peter Chen with his wife and teenage daughter, then others. Families Eliza didn't know, faces she'd never seen, people who'd heard that Cole Brannon needed help and decided to show up. They came with tools and lumber, with food for communal meals, with the frontier spirit that said, neighbors help neighbors even when, especially when, helping was hard. Helen Tucker organized them with the efficiency of a military commander, dividing people into work crews. Some started clearing the burned barn's remains. Others began framing new walls. The women set up cooking stations, turning the yard into a makeshift community center. And through it all, Eliza worked alongside them. She hauled water. She stirred massive pots of stew. She held boards steady while men hammered. And she answered questions when they came. "You're the one from the auction?" a young woman named Annie asked, her voice careful. "Yes." "Must have been terrifying." "It was." Eliza didn't elaborate, didn't dramatize, just stated fact. "My mama was sold like that before I was born." Annie's voice dropped. "To pay my grandpa's debts. The man who bought her was kind, though. They ended up married for real. But Mama always said she was lucky. and luck shouldn't be what determines if a person gets treated human. The conversation was repeated in variations throughout the day. People sharing stories, admitting their own connections to Maddox's system, finding common ground in shared injustice. And slowly, organically, a consensus built. What had happened to Eliza was wrong, and what was happening to Cole for stopping it was worse. By afternoon, more than 40 people crowded the ranch. The barn's frame was rising, rough but sturdy. Maisie ran between groups with Peter Chen's daughter, the two girls having formed instant friendship. And Cole worked with grim determination, hammering alongside neighbors, his face showing traces of hope he'd thought lost. That's when Silas Maddox arrived. He came with 6 men, all armed, riding into the yard like they owned it. The work stopped. Hammers went silent. Conversations died. Everyone turned to watch as Maddox dismounted, his expensive coat and polished boots absurdly out of place among the work-worn gathering. "Well," Maddox's voice carried across the sudden quiet. "This is quite the party. Pity I wasn't invited." Cole stepped forward, placing himself between Maddox and the crowd. "You're not welcome here. I'm here on legal business." Maddox pulled papers from his coat. "I have a contract that says Miss Hart owes 7 years of labor. I'm here to collect my property." "She's not property." Cole's voice was steel. "And you're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of your mind if you think anyone here will let you take her." Maddox's eyes swept the crowd, taking in the number of people, the rifles visible on wagons and propped against work tables. His smile tightened. "You've made this more complicated than necessary, Cole, but complexity doesn't change the law." "Then let's talk about the law." Helen Tucker stepped forward, holding papers of her own. "These are copies of Miss Hart's contract, the one you had her father sign. I've had 3 lawyers review them. Want to know what they found?" Maddox's expression flickered. "That's proprietary." "They found that the contract violates the 13th Amendment's prohibition against involuntary servitude. They found language that constitutes fraud under territorial statute. They found that auctioning a human being, even under the guise of labor contracts, is illegal under federal law as of 1865. Helen's voice rose, carrying to every corner of the yard. "In short, Mr. Maddox, your contracts are worthless, and your actions constitute multiple criminal violations." "That's absurd." "Is it?" Reverend Walsh appeared from the crowd, his young face set with unexpected steel. "Because I've documented everything, Mr. Maddox. Every auction, every questionable contract, every person your system has hurt. I've sent those documents to the territorial governor, to the federal marshal, and to newspapers in 3 territories. He held up a telegram. "This arrived this morning. The territorial governor is sending investigators. They arrive in 4 days. The color drained from Maddox's face. "You're bluffing." "Read it yourself." Walsh handed over the telegram. Maddox scanned it, his hands beginning to shake. Eliza watched the progression of emotions across his face: disbelief, anger, and finally, fear. The kind of fear that came from realizing the ground had shifted beneath your feet. "This doesn't change the immediate situation," Maddox said, but his voice had lost its authority. "I still have legal contracts that we're challenging in territorial court as of tomorrow morning." Tom McGrath stepped forward with more papers. 43 families have joined a class action suit against you, Maddox. We're going after every contract, every foreclosure, every piece of land you acquired through coercion or fraud. Even if some of it's technically legal, the cost of defending all those cases simultaneously will bankrupt you." "You can't." "We already did." Sarah McGrath's voice was sharp with satisfaction. "Papers were filed this morning. You'll be served officially within the week." Eliza watched Maddox's face as he realized what was happening. These people, poor ranchers, farmers, working folk, had organized against him, had used his own weapons, law, documentation, public pressure, and turned them back on him. He'd built an empire on isolated people being too afraid to resist, but they'd stopped being isolated. They'd become a community. "This isn't over," Maddox said, but it sounded hollow even to him. "Yes, it is." Cole's voice was quiet but absolute. "You lost the moment you turned personal vendetta into public spectacle. You could have walked away, taken your money, moved on, but you had to push. Had to threaten my child, burn my barn, try to break me. He stepped closer. Well, I didn't break. And neither did anyone else here. We're done being afraid of you. Maddox looked around the yard at 40-some faces staring back at him with expressions ranging from anger to contempt to simple resolve. His 6 men shifted uncomfortably, clearly calculating whether their pay was worth a fight against these numbers. Mount up, Maddox said to his men. His voice had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. We're leaving. And Maddox? Helen Tucker's voice stopped him as he reached for his horse. If anything happens to anyone here, if a single fence post gets damaged, if one cow goes missing, we'll know exactly where to look. And next time, we won't bother with lawyers first. It wasn't quite a threat. It was a promise wrapped in frontier justice, the kind that said some things were bigger than law books and courtrooms. Maddox mounted without another word. He and his men rode out, and Eliza watched until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did she let herself believe it might actually be over. The yard erupted in conversation, relief and triumph mixing with lingering adrenaline. Someone started hammering again, and the sound broke the spell. Work resumed, louder now, energized by victory. Cole turned to Eliza, his face showing exhaustion and something else. Maybe pride, maybe relief, maybe just the overwhelming gratitude of someone who'd been prepared to fight alone and found an army instead. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "I think so." Eliza's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Is it really over?" "The immediate threat?" "Yes. Maddox won't risk direct action with this many witnesses and federal investigators coming." Cole paused. "The legal complications will take time to sort out, but you're not going back to him. That much is certain." Maisie appeared between them, her face bright with uncomplicated joy. "We won! We won! And you get to stay forever and ever, and we're getting a new barn." "Easy, little bit." Cole lifted his daughter, holding her close. "We won today. That's enough." But as Eliza watched father and daughter, watched neighbors working side by side to rebuild what cruelty had destroyed, she thought maybe it was more than enough. Maybe it was everything. The barn raising continued for 3 more days. By the time the last family departed, Cole had a new barn. Not fancy, but solid and weather-tight. The cattle had proper shelter. The ranch was whole again. And Eliza had something she'd never expected to have, a place that felt like home. 3 weeks later, official papers arrived. The territorial governor's investigation had concluded that Maddox's contracts were illegal. All debts claimed under those agreements were voided. People who'd lost property were given paths to reclaim it. And Silas Maddox himself was facing charges of fraud, intimidation, and operating an illegal bondage system. His empire was collapsing, one legal filing at a time. Cole read the documents aloud at dinner while Maisie played with her food, and Eliza tried to process what freedom actually meant when it was real, not just promised. "It says here you're legally free of all obligations." Cole looked up from the papers. "No debt, no contract, no claims against you. You're free, Eliza. Completely." "So I can go?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. "Anywhere I want?" Something flickered in Cole's expression, hurt, quickly masked. "Yes. Anywhere you want." "Even if I want to stay here?" Eliza's voice was soft but steady. "Work for wages, like you said. Help Maisie with her schooling. Maybe be part of this?" Cole set down the papers. "You want to stay?" "I don't have anywhere else." Eliza paused, gathering courage. "And more than that, I don't want anywhere else. This is the first place I've ever felt like I mattered. Like I was more than just a burden or a problem to be solved." "You were never either of those things," Cole said quietly. "Not to us." "Can she stay, Papa?" Maisie looked between them with hope bright in her eyes. "Can she stay and be part of our family for real?" "If that's what she wants." Cole's eyes met Eliza's. "But it has to be her choice. Real choice, not gratitude or obligation." "It's my choice." Eliza felt certainty settle in her chest. "I choose this. I choose you both." Maisie let out a whoop of joy, launching herself at Eliza with enough force to nearly knock over her chair. Cole's smile was slow but genuine, reaching his eyes for the first time since the auction. "Then you stay," he said simply. for as long as you want. The winter passed into spring, and with it came changes both large and small. The barn housed cattle and new chickens. The garden Eliza planted pushed green shoots through thawed earth. Maisie's reading improved until she was sounding out words in the old Bible without help. And Eliza learned what it meant to live without fear. To wake up knowing the day ahead held work and challenges, but not cruelty. To sit at a table where her voice mattered. To tuck a child into bed and hear "I love you" said without calculation or condition. One evening in early summer, as the sun painted the western sky in shades of amber and rose, Eliza stood on the porch watching Cole work with a new colt in the corral. His patience with the frightened animal reminded her of that first day. The same careful hands, the same quiet voice, the same absolute refusal to use force where kindness would serve. He caught her watching and walked over, dust from the corral coating his boots. "Penny for your thoughts?" "I was thinking about choices." Eliza turned to face him. "How a year ago I had none, and now I have so many I don't know what to do with them all." "That's a good problem to have." Cole leaned against the porch rail beside her. "Any choices you're leaning toward?" "One." Eliza took a breath, gathering courage. "I've been thinking I'd like to open a school. A real one, for all the children in the territory whose families can't afford town tuition. Teach them reading and numbers and give them chances their parents never had." Cole was quiet for a moment, and Eliza worried she'd overstepped, presumed too much about her place here. Then he smiled. Sarah would have loved that idea. She always said education was the thing that set people free more than any legal document could. He straightened. "I've got some money saved from selling cattle. Not much, but enough to help get a schoolhouse built. And Tom McGrath mentioned his oldest is training as a carpenter. Might do the work for reduced cost if it's for a school." "You'd do that?" Eliza's voice caught. "Help me build a school?" "Help you build a future, you mean?" Cole's expression was serious now. "Eliza, you've been here 8 months. In that time, you've made this house a home again, given Maisie a teacher and a friend, and reminded me what it looks like when someone chooses to stay because they want to, not because they have to." He paused. "So yes, I'd help you build a school. I'd help you build anything you dreamed up." The words hung between them, meaning more than their surface suggested. Eliza felt her heart speed up, wondering if he felt it too. This thing growing between them, too fragile yet to name but too strong to ignore. "Papa, Eliza!" Maisie's voice called from inside. "I finished my writing. Come see." The moment broke gently. Cole smiled and gestured toward the door. "After you." They went inside together to where Maisie had covered a slate with careful letters spelling out, "Miss Eliza's School for Everyone. Opening soon." "I made a sign," Maisie announced proudly, "for when we build the school. Is it good?" "It's perfect," Eliza said, her throat tight with emotion. She looked at this child who'd offered her a stick-figure family when she had nothing, at the man who'd bought her freedom and never asked for anything in return, at the home they'd built from ruins and courage. And she understood finally what the opposite of being owned looked like. It looked like being chosen, and choosing back. The school opened the following autumn in a small building raised by community effort on the corner of Cole's property. 15 students came that first year, children of ranchers and farmers, of various ages and abilities, all hungry for learning. Eliza taught them with fierce dedication, remembering what it felt like to have no choices. She made sure every child who passed through her classroom understood that education was a door they could walk through toward futures their parents might never have imagined. Cole built her a desk from oak and carved her name into it. Maisie helped paint the walls cheerful yellow. And on the first day of school, 3 families brought pies in gratitude for giving their children this chance. Silas Maddox was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 5 years in territorial prison. His properties were seized and auctioned off, the proceeds going to repay his victims. The town of Redstone elected a new mayor and new businesses opened, ones not owned by a single man who'd held the whole territory hostage. Change came slowly, the way it always did on the frontier, but it came. 3 years after the auction, on an autumn evening when the air smelled of wood smoke and harvest, Cole asked Eliza to take a walk with him. Maisie stayed behind with Helen Tucker, who'd become a regular visitor and unofficial grandmother to the girl. They walked to the ridge overlooking the ranch, the house, the barn, the small schoolhouse where lamplight burned as Eliza prepared tomorrow's lessons. "I've been thinking," Cole said finally, "about choices and futures and things I probably should have said a long time ago." Eliza's heart started that familiar acceleration. "What things?" "That I love you." He said it simply, directly, the way he said everything important. That somewhere between auction block and barn raising, between biscuits and book learning, I fell completely in love with you. And I know I've got no right to say it. You're barely getting used to being free, to making your own choices without pressure, but I wanted you to know. No expectations, no pressure, just truth. Eliza turned to face him fully, this man who'd saved her, and then spent 3 years proving that salvation wasn't ownership. "Cole, you don't have to say anything. I love you too." The words came out sure and strong. "I have for a while now. I was just afraid to say it, afraid you'd think it was gratitude or obligation or—" He kissed her then, gentle and asking, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She kissed him back, pouring 3 years of trust and hope and carefully built love into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "Not because of debts or contracts or anything but choice. Marry me because you want to build a life together. Because I'm happiest when you're here. Because Maisie draws pictures with 4 stick figures now and keeps asking when you're going to be her real mama." "Yes." Eliza felt tears on her cheeks but didn't bother wiping them away. "Yes, I'll marry you because I choose you, because I choose this life, because I've never felt more free than I do when I'm here with you and Maisie." They married the next spring in the small church with Reverend Walsh officiating. 40 families came to celebrate, the same people who'd helped raise a barn and stand against tyranny. Maisie served as flower girl, scattering petals with solemn importance. Helen Tucker cried openly, not bothering to hide it. And when Cole and Eliza exchanged vows, simple promises about partnership and respect, about choosing each other every day, about building a future neither could have imagined, every person present understood they were witnessing something that went beyond romance. They were witnessing the triumph of human dignity over systems designed to crush it. Years later, when Eliza's school had grown to 30 students and Cole's ranch prospered, and Maisie was preparing to attend teachers' college in Denver, people would tell the story differently. Some said Cole Brannon had rescued a damsel in distress. Others claimed Eliza Hart had seduced a lonely widower. But the people who'd been there, who'd watched a woman stand on an auction block and a man pay everything he had to unlock her chains, who'd seen a community choose courage over comfort, who'd witnessed the slow transformation of a survival arrangement into genuine love, they knew the truth. It wasn't a rescue. It wasn't seduction. It was a choice, made over and over again by people who understood that freedom meant nothing if you couldn't choose to give your heart away and trust it would be held carefully. On summer evenings, Eliza would sit on the porch of the house that had become her home, watching Cole work with horses and Maisie, no longer small, but still fierce, practice her own teaching with younger students. She'd trace the faint scars on her wrists, souvenirs of the worst day of her life. And she'd remember that sometimes the worst days led to the best ones. That sometimes the hardest roads led home. That sometimes, rarely, miraculously, people who'd been broken by cruelty found each other and built something beautiful from the ruins. Cole would join her eventually, their hands finding each other the way they always did. And together they'd watch the sun set over land they'd defended, home they'd chosen, family they'd built from courage and hope, and the radical belief that people deserve dignity even when the law said otherwise. And if you asked Eliza whether she was free, she'd smile and say, "Every single day I choose to be here. That's the only freedom that matters." In the schoolhouse, preserved in a frame on the wall, hung 2 drawings. The first, 3 stick figures holding hands. "This can be us." The second, 4 stick figures in front of a small building labeled "School," beneath a bright yellow sun, signed in Maisie's careful handwriting, "Our Family." Both had come true, against all odds and in defiance of every system designed to prevent it. And every child who passed through Miss Eliza's school learned the story, not as a fairy tale, but as a truth that mattered, that people were never property, that communities could defeat tyranny, and that the strongest chains were the ones you chose to wear, the ones called family and love and home.